"34,000 runners in this year's Hong Kong Marathon." A U.S. fighter jet shoots down an unidentified object over Canadian airspace. And in Turkey and Syria, more survivors found in earthquake rubble. Good evening and welcome to TVB News. An American fighter jet shot down an unidentified cylindrical object over Canadian airspace on Saturday. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said the object was shot down on his orders a day after the United States took a similar action over Alaska. Matthew Brett reports.
A phone call between US President Biden and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. An American F-22 shot down the object using an AIM-9X Sidewinder missile. Trudeau later tweeted that Canada would recover and analyse the wreckage while continuing close coordination over such threats.
The object was flying at an altitude of approximately 40,000 feet, had unlawfully entered Canadian airspace, and posed a reasonable threat to the safety of civilian flight. The object was downed approximately 100 miles from the Canada-United States border over Canadian territory in central Yukon.
Anand stopped short of saying the object was a balloon, but said it was smaller than the Chinese balloon shot down off South Carolina's coast a week ago.
I will say that we are continuing to work closely with our NORAD partners and our U.S. partners, and we will make sure that we leave no stone unturned in the analysis of the data that we are now going to be turning to analyze.
Hours later, the US Federal Aviation Administration said it had closed some airspace in Montana in an area about 50 by 50 nautical miles around Havre near the Canadian border. A radar anomaly had been detected and fighter planes were scrambled to investigate. NORAD later said no objects were found correlating with the radar hits. A day earlier, the White House confirmed an object the size of a small car was downed in Alaska. US Northern Command was engaged in recovery on sea ice near Dead Horse, Alaska. F-22s have now taken out 3 objects in 7 days in North American airspace, a stunning development that the White House and the Pentagon are remaining largely tight-lipped about. Matthew Bray, TVB News.
Toronto Mayor John Tory has resigned after a newspaper reported he had an affair with a 31-year-old staff member. The 68-year-old acknowledged the relationship in a statement announcing his departure, saying the relationship had ended by mutual consent earlier this year.
I'm deeply sorry, and I apologize unreservedly to the people of Toronto and to all of those hurt by my actions, including my staff, my colleagues on City Council, and the public service, for whom I have such respect. Most of all, I apologize to my wife Barb and to my family, who I've let down more than anyone else.
Elsewhere, thousands of rescuers in Turkey and Syria continued their frantic search for survivors as the death toll from recent earthquakes surpassed 28,000. A UN aid official has predicted the figure will at least double. Close to 4,000 lives were lost in Syria, but official numbers are sketchy because victims are scattered across government and rebel-held territories. Nasvi Karim reports.
A crying infant is rescued in Aleppo, Syria. In Hatay, southern Turkey, another baby, 7 months old, is pulled from the rubble. Nearby, a 10-year-old girl is extricated from a deep hole drilled by rescuers. But these are rare miracles of life for rescuers surrounded by death. The death toll from Monday's 7.8 magnitude earthquake and aftershocks that utterly flattened parts of Turkey and Syria has passed 28,000. And the grim outlook is for thousands more.
It's deeply, deeply, deeply shocking. The idea that these mountains of rubble still hold people, some of them still alive, many of them dead. We haven't yet begun to really count the ultimate number who may have died.
In some parts of Turkey, rescue efforts have been hampered by looting, with police and the military fanning out as much as possible to stop gangs of looters. In the Kurdish-majority city of Diyarbakir, Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan said universities would switch to remote lessons to free up state-run dormitories for quake survivors, who will also have access to hotels and guest houses. Meanwhile, across Turkey, mass graves such as these near Antakya are being dug up for the dead. The hundreds of graves spaced no more than a metre apart will be marked by simple wooden planks set vertically in the ground. In Syria, President Bashar al-Assad spoke to Russian rescuers as he toured Jableh, one of the worst-stricken cities.
What you've done here is great work, because it's the first time in Syria to have such a disaster during the last 250 years, something like this. So we didn't have any experience in that.
Also in Syria was World Health Organization Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus, who welcomed the temporary suspension of US sanctions on the Syrian government to ease emergency and rescue work, and vowed to continue its support.
It's heartbreaking, the damage and the impact on the people. And we have just come today with some supplies and look forward to continue to support.
Nazri Karim, TVB News.
Hong Kong's rescue team found 3 survivors in a quake-devastated region in Turkey on Saturday. Commander of the team, Yu Man-yeong, said he has no plans for the team to leave yet. More details about the rescue were revealed by the team via video link today. The commander of the rescue team said they were told by residents that there were signs of life under some collapsed buildings. They then began excavation work after making assessments. They later heard human voices coming from beneath the debris. The commander said the weather, the aftershocks, and the lack of telecom networks, transport and fuel were some of the major difficulties they encountered. The rescue effort began on Wednesday, and the team only brought with them materials sufficient for 1 week. But Yu said they have no plans yet to pull out. The 59-strong team consists of firefighters as well as officers from the Security Bureau, the Immigration Department and the Department of Health. Locally, more than 34,000 runners showed up today for the Hong Kong Marathon, which had been postponed for several months because of the pandemic.
The Hong Kong Marathon, initially scheduled for last November, finally took place this morning after its pandemic-enforced postponement. Chief Executive John Lee, who just returned to the city after his visit to the Middle East, officiated at the opening ceremony for the full marathon. This year, runners taking part in the full or half marathon races started in Tsim Sha Tsui. 10-kilometer runners took off at Island Eastern Corridor. All participants were aiming for the finish line at Victoria Park in Causeway Bay. Some of them even dressed up to take part in the annual event. The first man to cross the finish line was Kenya's Philemon Kipchumba. Ethiopia's Fantu Iticha Jimba was the first woman to complete the race. Chow Yun-fat, the 67-year-old Hong Kong actor, was one of the 10-kilometer runners. He reached the finish line at around 7 in the morning. Some runners felt unwell after they reached the finishing point. Despite the high humidity, some participants said it was the perfect weather for a marathon.
It was not too sunny and not too cold, so I think it was, for me, I guess it was perfect weather. But maybe it's because I come from Europe, so for me, I'm more used to this kind of weather. That's why.
Others also said it was the reason they very much enjoyed the race.
It was really great because when we were coming back, a lot of people were cheering and all along Causeway Bay, and it's really motivated and we were really happy. Yeah, it was really good.
This is the first time I'm running in my life like a marathon. This is my first time, yeah. So it's really special to me. And people were very supportive on the way. So a lot of cheers that we got, so it was fun, yeah.
This year, marathon's participants who are Hong Kong permanent residents were able to win a $10,000 special incentive award if they could complete the race in a specific time.
Sponsors want to celebrate the 25th anniversary of this event. Therefore, he pay out this money to them. I'm still working hard to fight for the sponsor to carry on with this good motive. Hopefully, if possible, we can maintain it or we change another style to do it.
The organizers said the next marathon is possibly scheduled to take place in November, and they said they hope to keep the special bonus for the November marathon. Christy Khan, TVB News.
The government has urged people travelling to the Hengyunwai border control point not to park their vehicles at the port, even if they have a reservation. Parking spaces in Hengyunwai border control point have been in short supply because it is packed with overstaying vehicles as well as cars without reservations. A lawmaker said the existing 400 parking spaces in Hengyunwai cannot meet current demand. He says the government must provide at least 1,500 parking places and set up more temporary car parks around the area to mitigate the problem. Executive Councillor Jeffrey Lam thinks the city's economy can only return to its pre-pandemic levels by the end of the year at the soonest. He also said the chief executive's trip to the Middle East will bring along opportunities not just to Hong Kong. Since Hong Kong reopened its doors to the world, the SAR government has beefed up efforts to boost the economy by attracting overseas companies to invest in the city. Within just 4 months, Chief Executive John Lee has visited Thailand and some Persian Gulf countries. Still, no big names have landed in Hong Kong so far. Speaking to TVB News, business sector lawmaker Jeffrey Lam said John Lee's visits carry concrete meanings.
CE has spread good stories about Hong Kong, the opportunities about Hong Kong. It was well received. And I expect to see more investment coming from the Middle East, from ASEAN countries into Hong Kong very, very soon. They are looking Hong Kong as a stepping stone, as a center for leading them into Greater Bay Area and the whole of mainland. So I think it's tremendous opportunities. We should make use of it, and we should look positively into how we should react to all those opportunities.
Ahead of the new budget, Lam suggested that authorities continue supporting the business sector, such as the rollout of another round of the employment support scheme or consumption vouchers. He believes the local economy can only return to its pre-pandemic levels by the end of the year at the soonest.
Using a very sick man as an example, after he's well, he still needs a few months to recover. Our restaurant has to be ready, our retail shop has to be ready, but right now we have a shortage of people. You know, those workers has to regroup and come back to work for their old employees, or the old employer has to find new employees. So it's coming, is maybe slowly, but I'm positive.
He also believes relief measures such as SME financing guaranteed by the government will no longer be needed next year, as the economy is expected to pick up this year. Still to come on tonight's news. Russia launches a surge of attacks in southeastern Ukraine. African swine fever virus detected at a Tarku-Ling pig farm. And at Chichu Center in West Kowloon, Cantonese Opera performances that make a difference. Welcome back to TVB News. According to Kiev's top military commander, Ukrainian forces are holding their defense along the front line in Donetsk as Russia continues its assault on the region. This comes as the founder of Russia's Wagner Group said on Sunday that the mercenary force had taken the village of Krasna Tora on the northern edge of the embattled town of Bakhmut. Daniel Rell tells us more.
In a telegram message after a call with US General Mark Milley, Valery Zaluzhny, the commander-in-chief of Ukraine's armed forces, said Russia carries out some 50 attacks daily in Donetsk, a region in the southeast of Ukraine that Moscow has been trying to fully occupy. Still, Zaluzhny said Ukrainian troops are holding their defense along the front line in Donetsk and that Kyiv has managed to regain previously lost positions while gaining a foothold in them. He added fighting is particularly fierce in the area of Vuhledar and Mariinka, and that Ukrainian forces continue to hold Bakhmut and are trying to stabilize the front line around the town. Meanwhile, Yevgeny Prigozhin, founder of Russia's Wagner Group, said on Sunday that the mercenary force had taken the village of Krasna Hora on the northern edge of Bakhmut. The Wagner Group has been spearheading Russia's assault on the embattled town. Prigozhin said it could take 2 years for Moscow to gain control of the whole of the Donetsk and Luhansk regions in Ukraine, which have become the Kremlin's key strategic targets after its initial war plan faltered in the face of stiff Ukrainian resistance. Moscow last year claimed both as republics of Russia in a move condemned by most members of the United Nations as illegal. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and other military officials have been on a string of diplomatic missions in recent months, trying to secure more Western weapons and fighter aircraft in anticipation of a Russian spring offensive. Dan Norell, TVB News.
Police were out in force across France on Saturday as protesters held a fourth round of nationwide demonstrations against President Emmanuel Macron's plans to reform the country's pension system. Saturday's protests began peacefully, although Paris police said they arrested one person for possession of a firearm and detained several others for vandalism. The rallies come after lawmakers began a fiery debate earlier this week on Macron's pension bill to raise the minimum retirement age for a full state pension from 62 to 64. The French president has called the reforms indispensable for ensuring the long-term survival of the country's pension system. He also noted that workers in neighboring countries retire years later. Continued protests look likely to strengthen efforts by labor unions and left-wing legislators to try to block the bill. Unions issued a joint statement on Saturday threatening to cause a nationwide shutdown from March the 7th if their demands are not met. Back locally, authorities say samples taken from a local pig farm have tested positive for the African swine fever virus. The Agriculture, Fisheries and Conservation Department inspected a licensed pig farm at Taquiling and took samples from 32 pigs for testing. About 100 pigs there will be culled. 5 pig farms within 3 kilometers of the farm were inspected and no abnormalities were found. Authorities also stressed the virus will not infect humans, adding thoroughly cooked pork is safe for consumption. A representative from the industry believes the virus had been indirectly transmitted after migratory birds ate pig food. The Xichu Center in the West Kowloon Cultural District recently staged 2 exceptional Cantonese opera performances, incorporating a range of special access services for the first time. This allowed audience members with disabilities to get a taste of the beauty of Chinese opera. Sakura Ip tells us more.
This performance at Xichu Center in West Kowloon was far from traditional. In addition to the performers on stage, there were interpreters for audience members with visual and hearing impairments. These magicians made music visible to people with hearing difficulties through theatrical interpretation. Some of them transformed opera scenes into vivid audio descriptions. Kuni-chan, who's visually impaired, said the experience was special, as the description provided a detailed picture of the actors' movements, as well as the colors of their costumes. So just how can we make music visible? Interpreter Andy Lee said instead of presenting the melody, he could present the name and pitch of the song to give the audience the context of the music. For example, by mimicking a bird song with body movements. He said it was a very moving experience to see audience members enjoy the performance. Theatre staff also adjusted the brightness of lighting and the volume levels of sound effects. This to minimize potential discomfort for audience members who may be sensitive to strong lights or sound. For audience with special needs, they can request a portable service bell to contact staff members if they need any assistance during the performance. Sakura Ip, TVB News.
That's the news. Thanks for watching.